I'm a first-time buyer, and I'm very, very excited about buying my first property, house or condo. Okay, so they're going to buy a house or condo. When is it okay or encouraged for me to withdraw my savings or use some investments to buy this real estate? So I know from experience as a real estate lawyer, people get very, very scared, Zach. I have what's called liquid money and non-liquid money. So people lock their money into all sorts of vehicles, whether it's for retirement, for future planning. They're worried always about pulling it out. I'm gonna guess with this reader. And as far as getting a tax hit, interest hit, or maybe they just should keep their investments where they're being. So people get very nervous. How much or where should I use my investments as far as buying real estate? I'm sure you've had these questions before, Zach. Let's jump in.
Awesome. So I was just watching a movie or whatever it was a couple of days ago, and I heard a quote. I think it's from Jay-Z, which is, "If you can't afford to buy it twice, you can't afford it." It was an interesting perspective because it really gives you, a look into what's disposable and not, right? Um, so when we go over the calculation with my clients, and especially because we live in Ontario, not too many people can afford to buy it twice, if you know what I mean. But when it comes to buying a condo or a house, we have to we have to make sure that you're going to be living comfortably, and we have to make sure that we take into consideration interest rate risk. And a lot of the problem with people over the last, I want to say 3 4 years, well, not even 4 years, 3 years was they didn't take into consideration interest rate risk properly, which, the stress test for most people will cover, and we'll get into that in a second. But to answer your question, you're going to have a set amount of mortgage payments a year, right? Some people do it monthly, some people do it biweekly, and that biweekly payment for whatever the term of your mortgage is. Let's say you do a 5-year fixed, it's not going to change for 5 years. So you have certainty knowing over the next 5 years, I'm going to have to pay this much every single month, and that's my mortgage payment, my property tax, and sometimes it's lumped together in one payment, and that's what we're going to need to afford for the cost of housing. On top of that, we're going to have a down payment. Okay. Now, before we move out, if we know that this is, well, let's say our mortgage payment's going to be $1,000, which is extremely low, but it's just for the purpose of the example. Let's say it's going to be $1,000, and this is every 2 weeks. It's going to be $1,000, and we want to have an emergency fund, which is a liquid fund, saying, God forbid we were to lose our jobs, we were to get injured on job, whatever it is, and we're not able to work and produce an income for the next, let's say, whatever it is, 10 months, 5 months, 6 months. We want to make sure that we have enough money saved so that we can afford those payments anyways. Okay. So if we know it's going to cost us $1,000 bi-weekly, right? Every 2 weeks, then that's give or take 2,000 and change a month. And we know we're going to be off for 10 months. So we got to have 20,000 and change available just for these mortgage payments. So boom, that's one thing right there. I always tell people you can't afford to move out if you don't got the 10 months right there. On top of that, you have to have all the rest of your monthly expenses lumped into that emergency fund as well. So that's maintenance, that's utilities, that's car insurance, that's car payments, that's your general life insurance, and then just the everyday expenses of life goes. And anybody who's gone to buy romaine lettuce recently knows how expensive groceries can be. So you have all these things, and I do 10 months because COVID especially has shown us that 5 months isn't exactly the fastest turnaround. So we got to have 10 months available. So the general rule that I'll use is 10 months of emergency savings plus whatever you need to fill and finish the house.
So right there is a starting point. I would say from a lot of people that come to me and they've already purchased their property. So they come to me from a closing standpoint. They've taken every dollar they've saved, and we'll get into it in a moment. But they say they've been very diligent, Zach. Since they were 18, they put money away in their RSPs or whatever investment vehicle they did for their retirement, right? They're now 27, 28, 32, whatever they are. And they're saying, you know what? I'm going to pour my life savings. I'm going to pull this money out right now towards purchasing my real estate. I'll pay it back over what X amount of time. I've never heard people saying, I have enough for my down payment and I have enough for my kitty emergency fund in case this thing goes awry within the first year to 5 years. And sounds like they should.
They definitely should, but like, if we run through the numbers, we do a 1-minute exercise right now. It's a tall order, right? Like if we have these young kids, in their late 20s, early 30s, looking to go buy a property for the first time in their life, right? Let's say even it's a couple, right? Two people looking to move out together. We have both their incomes to work on. Average income Canada, $60,000 right now. So they got 120,000 of income between the two of them to buy this property, which is a good amount of money, right? It's not small and significant. In Toronto, it's less significant, but it's not a small and significant amount of money, right? Let's say they can qualify for a mortgage of 35% of their, which is what it's supposed to be, not necessarily what they're doing right now, but that's what they're supposed to be qualifying for. So they're qualifying for a mortgage that's, let's just say, 40 grand a year, right? So that's what they're paying in a year. 40 grand a year to have an available income that's after tax is hard enough to begin with. On top of that, we've had to save, money to pay for that 40 grand over 10 months. Let's just call it 35 grand, right? We need to have an extra 35 grand available to move out. On top of that, if we're buying a condo, maybe it's 20 grand to fill it. If we're buying a house, maybe it's 30 or 40 to fill it, right? And when I say fill it, I mean furniture. We're not just sleeping on the ground, right? We need to have, cutlery, plates, cookware, appliances, bed, framing, everything, right? And what if there's small touch-ups that need to be done? What if we need to do a little bit of renos here and there, right? So on top of that, we're asking for another $20,000 to $30,000, let's just say. So now we have $70,000 to $80,000. Average cost of closing is probably about $10,000, given land transfer tax for first timers and legal fees and things like that.
Title insurance, etc.
Yeah, exactly. So we're adding 10 grand. Next thing you know, we're breaching 100 grand, right? So, and that's for just the average small, we're not looking at a relatively nice, condo downtown, maybe 1,000 square feet at most, right? So they got to have 100 grand on top of whatever they need to put down. So to ask a 28-year-old or 29-year-old to have saved, let's be real, it's a $700,000, at least $800,000 condo right now. We've asked them to save 250, 300,000 between the two of them over their lifetime. Like, we have to have, and these are individuals that were only making 60 grand a piece either, right?
Right.
It's not like they've been, making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, right? And that's why we're seeing a lot of people get loans from the bank of mommy and daddy, which there's nothing wrong with it, because in this life, it's hard to buy that property to begin with and not be a renter. But it's unrealistic for a lot of people. So they try and get into the market. They force themselves in the market, and they pray to God every day that they're going to be fine.
So what investments, though, are allowable in your mind as far as dipping into to use, and which ones? So if somebody, let's say all their money that they really have is in their retirement vehicle. So let's say RSPs in Ontario. So all your money's in your RSPs. That's, you've been very diligent, you're good about that. Can we use RSP money towards our down payment to buy our first property?
Beautiful. It's a great question. And yes, home buyers plan, right? So a lot of people are so happy with the first time home buyers plan account that's coming out, supposed to be coming out. It's not really coming out over the next year. But most people don't realize they've had this account for years just within your RRSP. It's called home buyers plan. You can take up to 35 grand out of it as a tax-free loan. You have to pay it back to yourself over 15 years, and you got a year buffer in between
15
that.
years, 1.5?
Yeah, 1.5 exactly.
Okay.
So even if you take the full 35,000 out, you're paying 2.25 back every single year, which you should be contributing to your retirement anyways, God willing, if you can. So it's really not so much of a loan as much as an incentive to save for retirement and to give you a little bit of a breathing room when purchasing your first property. You're using tax deductible money, because when you contribute to your RSP, it goes against your income with respect to what you need to pay taxes on. So it's an amazing vehicle to use. I recommend people use it because it's obviously something, like I said, it's tax efficient. You've been able to use it. And B, those next 15 years, you're going to become conditioned to putting money away into your RRSP, which I love, because the amount of people who don't save for their RRSPs and are going to be hurting in retirement is astronomical.
Now, are there other vehicles, for example, TFSAs? Are there other places where people have sunk in monies? So that's one example. Another one I'm going to say is, generally, like, what if I've been a savvy investor? And this is going to segue later on to question number 2. I'm taking a further look ahead. But let's say I like to buy stocks, and let's say I have them in stocks, or I have them in some sort of funds which contain many, many stocks. Am I smart to pull money out of these type of things to buy real estate?
Well, obviously you want to sell when you're up. So that's one thing. But yeah, you're definitely fine to, liquidate some assets. It's all about finding that allocation, right? Of A, what you can afford, B, which funds you want to liquidate from, and what type of accounts you want to liquidate from. Someone like me will go over that because there's some funds better than other to liquidate funds, right? So for instance, a lot of people use their basic savings account, which, it's great. It's not so risk right now, especially it's been great. If you've had it in there the last 2 years, you're probably laughing at most people. But that's the place that I would probably liquidate it from first, assuming it's not your emergency fund. Your emergency fund is obviously, we're not touching it for a while. And the reason being is because of the growth that you're receiving within your TFSA is tax-free, right? Why would you want to touch that money? Same for any non-registered account as the savings account. If it's not growing tax efficiently, let's use that money to put it towards your house and keep the tax efficient money growing, right?
And that $35,000 loan is from TFSA or RSPs?
No, just RRSPs.
Just RSPs. Wonderful.